extra flight time. I presume that's part of what they're hearing from customer base is that they want more flight time. Of course, everybody wants more flight time, but we also want performance. So when it comes to performance, you got to take a look at that and judge it for yourself. I thought it flew very well. We see the end of the flight, 3:05. Battery come back up, but we had a lot of battery sag in there. My connector at this point is wearing down. You'll see in this outside flight that it's not nearly as bad. In the outside flight, you can see when I take off here how my battery sag isn't nearly as predominant outside of that punch out that it was inside. Because I flew it outside my first couple of days with it. I actually got really lucky, and the wind was really low on this particular day. There was a couple of days in there that was a little bit more windy, and so when I dive, I'd kind of get blown around, or if I do tree surfing, I get blown around. So I've probably had about 45 to 65 flights on this, and right around that 50 flight marker, I started noticing that I was having troubles with the battery voltage sagging more and more and more. So that's not Happy Model's fault. That is just the PH20 connector. I do wonder if there's a huge variable in that, because I've got other quads sitting on my shelf that have had more flights than this have, and I don't think that it is suffering that much. So it could be the overall load of the system as far as electrical load, as well as that PH20 connector that we know it just breaks down. It doesn't break down as much as the rolled pin, but it still just does break down. So I want to make that a strong point that if you're looking for 3-minute flight time out of this guy and you fly like I do, then you're going to need to have good, relatively new, fresh batteries, and you might have some troubles even still that. You might want to switch to a different connector. If we go to a GMB27 or a BT20, I think you'll find that the battery sag is less, the performance is better, and flight time will be either what you get here or even possibly better. And you don't necessarily have to solder that directly to the board if you get a new pigtail. You can splice that in to just the wires. I know some people are averse to soldering on these boards because if you get them too hot, you can cause damage. It's been a long time problem on these thin little light boards is that we're always trying to make them thinner and lighter. And then if you add too much heat, you get a component that slides or something like that. Next thing you know, you got a board that doesn't work. So if you want to try a new connector and you want to buy some GNB or BT20 batteries, splice in that connector into the pigtail that's already on there rather than replacing the whole thing directly from the board. I wanted to make sure I did the outside flight because, like I said, not everybody flies these inside their houses. And also, the pid tune on this, while when you're just flying it, it's fine. It's pretty good. But when you do the punches and the recoveries, you may have heard it or seen it. There's a little bit of a shudder. I think we need some additional, possibly pid tuning or maybe just TPA adjustment, especially on that 100% throttle, the punch out. And I've got some testing where I did some dive testing, and I'll show 2 more of those. Those are, we didn't wash out, so that's a good thing for the pit tune and the powertrain of the system. But we do get some of those oscillations on 100% throttle, especially when you stay on it a little bit longer. And then at the very bottom, if your recovery isn't really smooth, you'll also get a little bit of an oscillation down there. So the pit tune isn't perfect, but I flew it as you see in front of you. You see the battery is popping back up. We didn't get it nearly as low, and we still got a 2-minute and 51-second flight time, and our battery is at 3.56 and climbing volts. This is where I'll show you a couple more punch outs, and you'll be able to hear the oscillation as well as look at the recoveries. That when we get up there well above the house, we stay on that 100% throttle a little bit longer. Oh, and there's a crash too. I'll put together a crash reel and I'll show that for you as well. Just durability is always an issue that people like to see. But you see it shudder that the longer you stay on the throttle up there. So I think a little bit of TPA adjustment should help with that. On the bottom, we may just need to make a different sort of either slider adjustments. Oh, yeah, I flat on hit that chair. But I wanted to show you that crash with sound because it was my most dramatic crash. It was outside, it was at speed, and it battery ejection on that guy. This is just a VTX test for those people that might not be familiar. This is a 200 milliwatt VTX. I've got a full review video on this camera and the Whoop Light VTX. I'm just kind of showing myself where I'm at. But this is 200 milliwatts that I'm running it at, as you can see in the top right hand corner. And I just fly around the house. I do try the additional test of flying around my neighbor's house, so I get 2 houses between us and the quad. That does not go very well, but obviously it's very flyable at 200 milliwatts around the front of my house. We also go over the top of the house. But trying to circle both my house and the neighbor's house, I knew that wasn't likely going to work. But I wanted to show you guys, I haven't tested this in a while. Let's see if HD0 made some other change and maybe we got some lucky performance increase. I have to do that on analog. It has to be 400 milliwatts. So I'm not surprised that 200 didn't work, but I kind of forgot I was going to do that additional test, so I did a little bit of general flying there. Now we've gone across my neighbors. Of course, they know we have a text chain that I put together with their permission, and yeah, full rainbow, and then it started to come back right when I disarmed. Wah, wah. Full disclosure, Happy Model did send me all the review samples, and then I dispersed them or sent them out to all my counterparts throughout the country. Look for Ryan Quillett. You guys know him for HD0. He will have a review video. ATX Airborne, he is probably one of the most enhanced video editors that we have in FPV as far as reviews go. So check out ATX Airborne. Dan Sagano, Skittles FPV will have one. Albert Kim will have one. And I believe Half Chrome will also have one. So I'll link their sites down below, and you can check their channels for when they have their videos available, and I encourage you to watch them. So I will play my crash reel up here, but do know that that's not a full crash reel. Like I said, I've had somewhere between 45 and 65 flights on this thing. I had a bunch of close proximity flights in the house where I was trying to get a hang of the precision that's necessary in order to fly through the kitchen tables and chairs, and I didn't really even bother looking at those flights because I considered those bumps. So these are crashes. Some might be mild, some might be wild. It's really going to vary, but in my opinion, I already showed you my hardest crashes, maybe my hardest two crashes with those two that we've already seen in the video. One of the things I always break is that little piece that goes right here. I break that almost uniformly. If we take a look at this one, I haven't broken that one yet. What's that mean? Well, probably means that I was flying this one more aggressively for a longer period of time, because when I fly this one now, I just kind of fly for general fun and purpose. I'm not trying to push myself necessarily. Every once in a while I might get a wild hair, but yeah, I generally break one of those battery braces on this frame and the 65 millimeter frame. Now this frame, originally when it started out several years ago, it was one that would break quite a bit. This is like the V4 now of this, quite durable outside of that little brace. For me, what I think I need to do is I just need to find a way to get some glue up in there, just on the top side. I don't want on the bottom side because my batteries are tight enough. And while I'm down there, you can see, yeah, that USB port is kind of extending down into our battery area. So every time we come down, we're kind of bonking that USB port. I really think this needs to be another millimeter higher in order to, well, maybe even 2 or 3 millimeters, because that bow in that is probably a millimeter. So I'd like to have at least a millimeter of clearance. So 2, maybe 3 millimeter. Yeah. Anyways, it's something I noticed, and I wanted to draw it out, is that, you know, it's going to bonk in there. Now, you don't have to necessarily manipulate this to get your USB connected to your cable. It's going to, I just kind of, well, you've got to get it out of the way since it's covering up part of it. I'll just show you what I do. So I use a long nose USB most of the time. So I just kind of get it started. I apply a little bit of pressure here. That way you see it kind of moving around. Come on, do it on camera. There we go. I got it started. And now we've got lights. We've got our connection. So we don't necessarily have to move it far. You can see there's a little bit of a bow. So that's not terrible, nor is it great. It's something I definitely need to call out. While we've got the USB port connected, I wanted to draw your attention to something I noticed, which I don't think I've ever seen any flight controller set up in this particular manner. Look at that, 3.2 kilohertz and 0.8 kilohertz on the gyro and the PID loop. I couldn't tell you why that is. Again, I've never seen it. We can see down here our CPU load is only 16, 17, maybe even 15%. So the CPU is in good shape, but for some reason, they made this choice, and I thought I should call that out, because if you're doing any sort of building with this particular all-in-one board, or if you flash the flight controller and you get some sort of oddity or problem that you're not able to solve, I would take a look at these settings and maybe match those to what you're looking at. Also, they have a, I think we've seen this antenna before because I've got one for here, but this antenna, it's very small, it's very light. For whoops, that's good. We've also got this connector down here for the UFL. This is, of course, for firmware updating. We got that special adapter I showed you in the quick specs. For me, what I would do on this, just like I did on my original, is I would just put a thin skin of, I think I did it on here. Maybe I didn't. No, I sure didn't. So what I would recommend, because if you lose this, you're very likely to burn out your VTX before you go pick it up. Unfortunately, these HD0 as well as, well, really all of our HD sort of VTX and micro VTXs get very, very hot. And they're not very resilient when it comes to losing their antenna. They use that. So I would put a thin skin of my favorite glue over the top, something that's going to add less than 1/10 of a gram, even less than that. We just want to give it some extra rigidity. Now these cutouts here are made to run a zip tie through there. I think a zip tie is actually going to weigh more than using some, say, E6000, just like I said, thin skin. And I would also do that for the connector that's on the camera. Because if that pops off, that's bad. And if the connector pops off the camera or the board, which I didn't say it, but I would also put a thin skin or on the connector on the board, those things come apart, then you don't get video. So you don't want them coming apart unless you're deciding to work on it, right? And you also notice in the quick specs, they did include longer screws in these posts. So that firms up this center section, which I think is a good move. It's very important. It's how I built mine. I went out to eBay and I found some 10mm screws, and they include a couple of spare ones, but I dropped the screws on the floor and I only could find 2. I think there was 4. I think there were 2 posts and 2 motors, but that could be off. Unfortunately, I just can't find them. They're tiny. But the center section is nice and firm, which is a good thing. And they also have adjustable camera angle, which I'm always talking about, and one of those things that I desperately call for manufacturers. But I did break my mount. See? Yeah, can you see it? It's coming apart down there. So this part, I broke a post, and I also broke the canopy. Now, I don't know how long it's been like that, because I didn't notice until I got down to the desk and got ready to record this video. So I've got a breakage of the canopy, which we do get an extra one, so be it, but I've also got a broken post right down here. Very likely, in flight footage of the indoor flight that I showed you, it was already like that, because I had a bunch of crashes. This does have smart audio hooked up, but it's not, and in my opinion, it's not necessary, because we can do HD0 or the VTX manipulation with stick commands anyways. Smart audio just allows you to do it through the typical Betaflight OSD, but it's there if you want to use it that way. I'll call out one final time: no connectors for the motors, which is good for performance and weight, but when it comes to repairability, if you need to take these motors off, I think soldering in there is doable for some and not for others. So yeah, you don't want to be melting your frame down, but yeah, you are, if you have to replace a motor for some reason, you are going to soldering. I mentioned replacing the pigtail or the connector on the battery to a GNB27 or BT20, two of the best micro connectors for batteries. And I mentioned splicing it. If that's not clear, it's just a matter of just, cutting the wires here, splicing in your other connector that is, of course, you don't want a bunch of extra weight and wire. So your GNB27, say you bought a pigtail, and then splice that pigtail in, have some heat shrink over the top of it to make sure that they don't touch. And you could do that without soldering directly to the board. And you could also do that without disassembling the quad. Of course, fully test the quad before you do any soldering. So my damage, to wrap that up, is I broke this post right up front. It's moving around here. And I broke the canopy right up front there as well. And then I broke this battery piece. So yeah, I got some damage, but it's all very, very flyable. Matter of fact, if I were to fly this again after I got done recording this video, which I'm sure I will, because I love whoops and I think they're really, really good fun, I probably wouldn't do anything to fix those things. I'd just go fly it and have some more fun. But that's just me. I got to report my experience, right? Now, the final question, if you didn't stick all the way around to the end, you don't get to know this. Which one do I prefer? Do I prefer the official Mauve Light 7 HD0 or my conversion from the 65mm HD0 up to the 75mm? And I prefer my conversion. I could be swayed if we put tri-blades on this, because I really kind of felt that in the cornering, that I had to use more throttle when cornering at speed, and tri-blades really helps. And this is also 1.5 grams lighter, and it matters. And I've got a GNB27 connector on there. It's a little long. I could make it shorter, of course. So I've got less battery sag on this one. But if you're interested in a bite and fly, this is what your option is. Otherwise, I can't even hardly suggest you necessarily do this unless you're an experienced builder either, because these wires, this is the conversion, by the way. This is the original over there. These wires are kind of shorter than I'd want them to be. You can see they're kind of tight, and I clipped off a little part of the frame in order to give it a little bit of wiggle room. So doing the Mobula 6 HD0 to Moblite 7 HD0 conversion, while it's doable, maybe you're better off. Check the prices. I'll link them both down below. Check the prices on the Mob 6 HD0 as well as the Moblite 7 HD0 and look at the price. Of course, these have new motors, and you might want these new motors for your own purposes. 1002 motors is a good choice. I don't think it's necessary on bi-blades. I don't think that they're necessary for indoor flight unless you're a top elite sort of freestyler. I think they're more for freestyler than they are for racing. For racing, you're going to stay at the top end of the throttle, which 0802, in my opinion, is going to be fine. But, if you're a top flight racer, you probably know better than I do because I don't even race. So I'll put links down below to the places where I can find the Moblite 7 HD0 as well as the Mobula 6 HD0, and you can take a look at both of those to see which one you got. You might have caught a little flash of that colorful gate that you saw out there. That same company, We Bleed FPV, they also make hot sauce. Now, I'm not a hot sauce guy. I've got kind of a sour tummy when it comes to hot sauce. But my 17-year-old and my wife, they've been using this a lot. Matter of fact, we got Thai food tonight. We loved a local Thai restaurant. My 17-year-old was dousing his Thai in this stuff. So if you like hot sauce and you like micros or whoops, go on over to We Bleed FPV. A little bit of a commercial for them. For your convenience, as I said, I will have the Mobula 6 HD0 as well as the Moblite 7 HD0 linked down in the video description if you care to check them out. I have a coupon code for Banggood, but my understanding is it only works for US and Canada. I have made contact with Banggood and asked them to open that up to many other countries, if not all other countries. Why they do that, I have no idea. I don't even understand their strategy. It would only frustrate your customers. Anyway, I don't want to get on a soapbox about that. I'm a little bit peeved at that sort of thing. It's the second time it's happened. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise, please let me know in the comment section below. I appreciate your time. And thanks for watching.
Full how to waterproof everything tutorial, but I did discuss silicon conformal coating and how to use silicon conformal coating to waterproof. So you might want to check that out. Thank you, Riot9, for 420 Australian dollars. It said Riot 9. Riot 9. Riot. Oh, I mean, you can see why I would be confused. Riot. I had a friend. No. I had a friend, so, oh, come on. There we go. Yeah, so his name is Riot9, and apparently it's pronounced Riot 9, but you can see my confusion. I had a friend once upon a time who became a DJ, and he decided he needed a DJ name, and his name was going to be, there you go. Now, how do you pronounce that? Well, it's a live stream. I can't hear you talking anyway, so it's going to be tough. But see, he wanted his name to be Insight. He wanted to be Insight, right? Like Insight, but with a psi because he's a DJ, so he's in Psytrance. But we all thought it looked more like, and that's what we called him. until he eventually, I'm pretty sure he eventually changed his name. It's like, too clever. You're clever. You're too clever. You got to be less clever. So if you have a weirdly spelled name, don't be upset when people mispronounce it. Either you're not upset. But, Peter M77, thanks for 50 Norwegian kroner. I get grainy image on O3 with auto camera settings. It's fine on manual. what are you changing about manual? So here's what I would do. Peter M., I can't directly solve this problem for you on screen, on live stream. What I would do is I would try to reproduce the grainy image by changing the manual settings. And that will tell you why what is the auto doing to make the image look bad? For example, is it turning the ISO up too high and that's making it grainy? And can you fix that by turning the ISO down in manual? Like, so if that was the problem, you could leave auto turned on, but set the max ISO to something lower. Yeah, that's how I would approach that problem. Change the manual settings to try to emulate the grainy image, and that will tell you which setting the auto algorithm is messing with to cause the problem. William Humphreys, great question. This is not a super chat, but it's a good question. I unscrewed the lens on my camera, and now I need to know how to get it back on focus. Here is the video that you want. Oh, look at that face. Oh, you can't see it. Oh, man, look at that handsome devil. Here's the video you want, William Humphreys. This video will show you how to focus your lens correctly. That was, so I didn't have a good microphone. So I used this face-worn microphone. I didn't have really any microphones around my studio. My office, whatever you want to call it. I've come a long way since then. Oh, I did have this looks like I did have a microphone over here at my desk, but not at the bench. This room has really filled out. It's come a long way since then. Something. I didn't have the blackout curtains here. I now have blackout curtains to help keep the light out. It was really affecting the color temperature of the room. I didn't have a beard. Come a long way since then. Yeah, Drew really hated that microphone. He hated that microphone. I don't know why I didn't get a lavalier microphone. I don't know why I didn't get a lavalier microphone. I don't know what my deal was. Digital FPV, thanks for a $6 super chat. How would I identify during flight that throttle liberalization is too high? What is throttle liberalization? We're just going to search for throttle liberalization. I think we're having a translation error here. I have literally, I don't know what throttle liberalization is. So linearization, oh, that could be it. Throttle liberalization, linearization. Thrust, you're talking about thrust linearization. Okay, so thrust linearization, the way to tell that it's too high is, one way to tell that it's too high is when you bounce off an obstacle, if the quad violently overreacts and the throttle surges, that means it's too high. When I have played with thrust linear in Betaflight, like I don't know if Ciati still uses it. I did a video where I looked at Ciati's build and Ciati's pit tube. And one of the things Ciati was doing at the time, he may still be, I'm not sure, was using thrust linear. And thrust linear helps account for nonlinearity in the thrust versus RPM output of a motor. At low RPM, a motor doesn't make very much thrust, and it needs to change RPM a lot to make more thrust. Whereas at high RPM, there is a more linear relationship between RPM and thrust. But at low RPM, the thrust sort of ramps up slowly. And so what thrust linear tends to do is make the motors more responsive at low throttle. Which means that if you're at low throttle and you smack an obstacle and the quad jumps off the obstacle, if thrust linear is too high, it will violently jump and the motors will surge. And that to me was a reason why I stopped using it. I didn't like that. Thank you, Matt Roach, for a $5 super chat. I'm moving from Betaflight 4.3 to 4.4. Can I bring over my tunes? I am told, Matt Roach. So first of all, the safe migrator is not 100% safe to go from 4.3 to 4.4. For example, the changes. You know how when you turn on bidirectional D-Shot, it automatically sets up your notch filters. Those changes have changed between 4.3 and 4.4. So if you copy your 4.3 D-Shot configuration over, it will skip that step. You need to go in the configurator and enable bidirectional D-Shot so that it sets up your notch filters correctly. I'm told that the PID values are safe to carry over between 4.3 and 4.4. Okay? So if you have a particular PID tune that you like, the P, the I, the D, the feed forward, those values, I believe they're safe to carry forward. The Betaflight devs are working on a cloud-based configuration transfer utility. I don't know when it will be released, but eventually that is a problem that they hope to solve. Ooh, we got a ton of super chats. I gotta stay on these super chats. Ligma FPV, thank you for $5 super chat and the opportunity to say Ligma on stream. You look at
John here, guys, and today we're talking about the Crux 3. The Crux 3, how do they come up with the names of these things over at Happy Model? I'm not really sure, but this is the latest ultralight 3-inch to come out, and man, you know, I really love this formula. It's been a while since we've seen a good one of these, and this really comes in at sort of a midpoint between a lot of the very popular things that have been out, and it gives you a lot of versatility for an extremely lightweight. This thing, as it sits with the Crossfire receiver and this medium Model T, comes in at only 43 grams. So incredibly light, and if you combine it with a little 2S, this is a Tattoo 450 milliamp 2S pack, it's only like 70 something grams. So light. And so at first glance, I would think like, okay, this is kind of a lighter version of the Diatone Cube 339. But no, that's actually that's heavier without a battery than this thing is with a battery. That's how light this thing is. Now this does use a slightly smaller motor. It's a 1202.5 6400 kV that's meant to be run on 2S. You can actually run on 1S too, but like, I'm not bothering that. 2S is the way that I would go with this thing. It has the Crazy VF4X board. This is that one that's like totally all-inclusive. It has your video transmitter built in and a camera plug. It has the motor plug, so there's essentially no soldering for this build if you use the built-in SPI receiver. But I don't recommend that you do that. Those receivers are garbage. I don't think they should even be using them for anything that's going to fly outside. It just doesn't have the range. If you're using it for a whoop board that's going to go inside, that's probably fine. But for anything outside, you need Crossfire. So I got the Crossfire version. Now, one thing I don't like is they just like taped an Immortal L antenna to the arm. It was gonna immediately get chopped up in the props if I tried to fly like that. So I happen to have a few of these mini Immortal T's. I went ahead and installed that. It was kind of a pain to get to, but at least the receiver's somewhat accessible at the bottom here. Rounding out the build, in addition to the Crossfire receiver, it does have this Caddx Ant camera. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. It's actually really, really good. Look at the shape of this canopy design. It's super, super light. But like I said, the antenna mounting for this Crossfire receiver was absolute garbage, unflyable. If I didn't have this, I'm not really sure how I would have mounted. They gave you one antenna tube for that Immortal L. It's kind of shaped like this, so I don't know what you were supposed to do with that anyway. I don't love that they don't give you a strap. They just give you some included rubber bands, and they're not even like the good rubber bands. I'm talking about, if you're gonna give me rubber bands, give me the kind that you get, you know, from some asparagus. You know, it makes your pee smell funny. Give me the good rubber bands. Not these are like the ones you would find in the office cabinet at work. They aren't worth using for anything. I mean, so far it hasn't broken yet, but I want something beefier. Asparagus ones. Come on. You can see it's not super rigid. It does have a little bit of flex, but it's so light that I don't think you're really going to be banging it and breaking it that much. The replacement vinyl plates for this are probably super cheap anyway. It does come with the very nice sort of carbon fiber look, happy model case. Inside there, you get some spare props, plenty of extra screws, some zip ties, extra um, thing of this little gooey stuff. I'm not really sure what that's for. And you get a holder for the Insta360 Go, which I sold and I kind of wish I still had it. In addition to that, you also get the camera controller for the Caddx camera, some really nice instructions on how binding up, and some cool Happy Model stickers. I think this is a Module 2. I'm not sure why they don't have a Crux sticker, but oh well, you get a Module sticker. So now we know the components. How does it fly? It flies really, really great. These GemFan Viblade 3018 props really give you something that can spin up quickly with the smaller size motor, and with the lightweight, it is a match made in heaven. You know, sometimes on these super, super ultralight toothpicks, you get a really, really floaty feel, but this has the perfect combination of power and a light weight that you do have enough power to make it super fun to do punches, to get really close proximity, to get really nice control, but it's not ultra floaty, which means that it almost flies kind of like a 5-inch racing quad. You know, still lighter than a freestyle quad, but it can actually drop in a predictable way. The way that it handles is kind of like one of my racing quads. The rates and pace that they have set up on default are actually pretty good. They're kind of on the slower end, so I don't know if they expect you to try to race this thing or if they're just trying to tune everything down so it's not super twitchy. It feels just like how I like my racing quads to feel, which is awesome. Probably similar to like a Betaflight default on 4.2. I'm not sure which firmware I put on this. I'll put it in this screen. I just set the switches and fly as it is, but I want to show how it is. The tune on this is actually really good. It flies exceptionally well. Is it as fast as something like this? This 3-inch, also on Viblade, is 339. And no, it's not. It's not as fast. This is a little bit faster on the top end, but in the slower speeds, they actually fly pretty similar. And because of the lighter weight, and it's a little bit quieter. So really this kind of feels kind of like the super ultra lightweight of the Diatone 229, but with a little bit more power, a little bit more control. I really like this formula, and this Caddx Ant camera is exceptional. The camera on this really looks great for an analog camera. You can actually see a little bit of detail in there to avoid some of those ghost branches, because on this size you really are going to want to get really close to stuff and do some awesome trick flying. I love this size and form factor. So if I was going to go to a park, this is a little bit lighter. You're not going to be going top speed, so I might actually pick this over my beloved Q339 just because it's quieter, the batteries are cheaper, everything's lighter, you're less likely to smash something. Now, if you did want to take it on a track, yes, this for sure. It's faster, it's beefier, it's going to survive crashes more. But if you're not going to be crashing and smashing, do this. You know, one thing that you probably could compare it to, the TP3. Here's a Toothpick 3 that I am reviewing right now. It's going to come out very soon. This is very close in how these fly. This flies exceptionally well. This is a little bit more power on this Toothpick 3 because it has some great AMAX motors. But the thing is, once you add in the premium VTX, the premium receiver, everything in here, this costs closer to $200. You can get this with the built-in receiver for like 85, 95 bucks. You know, add a Crossfire for an extra 20 bucks, and then boom, you're off to go. So this is like half the price. So although this does have a little bit more performance, this flies so well. I mean, goodness, the one downside is it's like a little tiny piece of copper that's your antenna here for your video. That is kind of garbage. So your video range is not like super awesome. That's probably my biggest complaint, because it does fly so well, because it does have Crossfire, I can go far. I wish I had a little bit better antenna on the video side, but other than that, this is outstanding. It does do 200 milliwatts. So you're gonna get at least a medium amount of range on this. I was flying this the entire time, all this footage from my car. So if I would have been sitting outside, you can factor in I probably would have gotten at least another 30% of range. I think this is the one to buy. If you want a lightweight park flyer, driveway flyer, backyard flyer, you can't build something that flies like this for this price, or anywhere close to it. So I do suggest that if you get the Crossfire version, go ahead and throw your own antenna on here. Mini Model T is what I would use. They're only like $3 or $4. I already had a few, so that was easy. A few little gripes on this one, but for the price, well under $100 with the built-in receiver, can you really complain that much? I mean, happy model. It's just getting better and better. This is the new low-cost leader, so not bad. Thanks, guys.
A little more cost effective. If you're starting from scratch, you might do better to buy the HD0 goggles, which are an all-in-one HD0 HC0 receiver and goggles all in one. Those goggles also have the ability to work with an analog receiver module and an HDMI input, so they actually could be used with other digital systems, analog systems, and HC0. They're actually one of the most flexible and versatile goggles you can get today. Next up, we'll take a look at the Walksnail system, and I know that Walksnail is a pretty weird name for a company, but that's just what they named their company. We've got a video transmitter. Enough said, it's a video transmitter. I think you know by now what that does. You can have a Walksnail standalone video receiver, which, similar to the HC0 video receiver, receives those signals from the transmitter and then outputs them via HDMI to a set of goggles that has an HDMI input. Or you could get the Walksnail Avatar goggles, which have built-in receiver and screens, and it's just an all-in-one unit. Now, a difference between the Avatar goggles and the other goggles that we've talked about so far is that the Avatar goggles don't have any capability for use with an analog receiver module or HDMI input. They work only with the Walksnail Avatar system. That is it. If you want to mix and match, you would need to buy another set of goggles to use with your other systems. There's one other thing to say about this system, and that is that the Walksnail Avatar goggles are also sold under the name Fat Shark Dominator. They are identical, just one is white and one is black, and whose tech support you call if you have a problem with them, that's the only difference. But we're just going to call them the Walksnail Avatar for the rest of this video. Next, we come to the DJI system, and this one's a little bit confusing because the DJI system actually has two different generations of equipment. The DJI Goggles V2 and the DJI Goggles 2, with the DJI Goggles 2 being the later and the most recent generation. By the way, also, FU DJI, Goggles V2, Goggles 2. That's not confusing, is it? We're going to do our best to keep that straight. Both the Goggles V2 and the Goggles 2 have an integrated receiver. They can both work with video transmitters from either of those two generations. The O3 generation, which works with the Goggles 2, or the Vista generation is what the older generation is called. Both of those goggles can work with either generation of video transmitter, although the performance that you get from them is not the same. We'll talk more about that a little later in the video. The main difference between the Goggles V2 and the Goggles 2 is that the V2 goggles have lower resolution and they have the ability to work with an analog receiver module through the AV input, whereas the Goggles 2 don't have any auxiliary inputs at all. They only work with the DJI video transmitters. Also, DJI video transmitters are called air units. So if you hear me saying air unit, that's what I mean, but I'll try to say video transmitter. Next, we're going to talk about the latency of the systems, and this is way more than just like a technological nitpick. The latency of the system is the time between when the camera sees something and when the display shows that thing to your eyes. And so, obviously, if latency was way too high, then you'd be flying and something would be in front of you and it would hit it before you could swerve to avoid it. Well, we're not talking about latency of half a second or a second. We're talking about latency of 50 milliseconds or less. So it might be tempting to think, what difference does it make? 20 milliseconds, 50 milliseconds? It's all so inconceivably fast that it can't possibly matter. This is not the video to do a deep dive into why latency matters, but it definitely does matter. And the difference between 50 milliseconds and 10 milliseconds can really make a difference. Low latency is very important when flying in proximity to objects and or when flying at high speed. That 30 or 50 milliseconds of latency can make a difference in how connected you feel to the quadcopter's motion, how seamless. And it really makes a difference in your ability to react and make last-minute corrections or to fly at very high speed if you're racing. Whether this is going to matter to you is going to depend a lot on the type of flying you do, but for people doing very fast, very precise flying in close proximity to objects, latency really matters. Now, the systems that we're going to talk about have two types of latency, fixed latency or variable latency. And fixed latency means that the latency of the system stays the same no matter what. Whereas variable latency means that the latency of the system goes up and down depending on the quality of the link. So you know how sometimes if you're watching a YouTube video and then buffering, that kind of stuttering is the kind of thing that happens with a variable latency link. The latency, you can fly behind an obstacle and then suddenly, the latency jumps. And It's not that fixed latency systems aren't affected by signal degradation. It's just that they respond with worse image quality, but still the latency is the same, and that can make a difference in certain types of flying. So here on the left side of the slide, we've got analog video and HD0, which are grouped together because they both have fixed latency. They also have pretty low latency, as low as 16 milliseconds for analog or 14 to 16 milliseconds for HD0, depending on whether you're running at 60 frames per second or 90 frames per second. But to be honest with you, I don't want to focus too much on these numbers because I'm going to guess that if you're watching this video, telling you that it has a latency of 16 milliseconds is fairly meaningless. And telling you that Walksnail and DJI have latency of as low as maybe 25 milliseconds and as high as 30 to 45 milliseconds when you're flying is probably also fairly meaningless. Instead, I'm going to try to put this into perspective for you. With Walksnail and DJI, the latency is higher, and so you feel less connected. You have less ability to just quickly respond to something like, oh, quad, I almost crashed, and I'm trying to make a correction. Or I'm trying to go through this turn, and I didn't line the turn up quite right, and I need to make a quick correction. With DJI and Walksnail, you simply are less able to do that because of the higher latency. That doesn't mean that people can't be very, very good pilots on Walksnail DJI. They can. And that latency is working against them, but they're able to overcome it. Whereas other people just really like the low latency connected feel of analog or HD0. And we'll talk at the end of the video about what kind of person might prefer one or the other based on that. The other thing that you have to understand when thinking about the latency of these systems is that the latency of Walksnail and DJI is variable, which means that while you are flying, it's going to change as the signal strength changes. It is little micro stutters while you're flying, fractions of a second, milliseconds, but the micro stutters are there. And you can have this experience where you're flying around outside and you're at a 25 millisecond latency, and then you fly into a building and suddenly there's this big concrete wall blocking your signal, and the latency jumps, and now you're flying suddenly at 30 or 35 milliseconds, and you can adjust to that. But when it happens in the middle of your flight line, that fraction of a second where you haven't adjusted yet can be really disorienting and really hard to compensate for. HD0 and analog don't do that. They stay consistent latency, and that's why some people prefer them. So DJI and Walksnail change their latency when the signal gets weaker, but that's not the only thing that they do. And analog and HD0 have consistent latency when the signal gets weaker, but it's not like they're immune to being affected by a weaker signal. Let's take a look at the way in which the signals break up when they get weaker. This is analog video, of course, and it is sort of constantly in a state of breaking up. Don't judge the absolute amount of range we get here because you don't know the test conditions, the output power, the antennas on the quads, etc. I just want you to pay attention to the way that the signal breaks up. And as we come in here, we start to see some static appear across the screen. The screen loses color, it goes black and white. Sometimes it rolls or sort of shudders, and then eventually it gets staticky to the point where I feel like I can't fly anymore, and I will bail out. Here I'm going super slow, you see. One thing that analog has going for it is that even, there we go, now it's like I'm literally blind, just raise the throttle and hope to climb. Yeah, see, it's not my first time. I knew that there was nothing for me to crash into and I could just climb out of that, but one thing analog has going for it is that when it does break up, a lot of times the image remains relatively flyable. You can still kind of see the obstacles in the horizon, even though you've lost a lot of color or maybe a lot of detail. Next, let's take a look at HD0, and I do feel obligated to let you know that this is the 540p 90 FPS mode, so the resolution you're getting is a little bit less than you could get, and you're not experiencing the 90 FPS mode because YouTube only shows 60 FPS. But again, I just want you to focus on the way that the signal breaks up and not in some of the other aspects of the situation. And the way that HD0 breaks up is that you get these white blocks on screen. Basically, whichever parts of the signal got lost show up on screen as these little white blocks. And some people have argued that this is similar to analog static, but I don't feel that way. I find analog static to be relatively easy for my brain to filter out. And I find this breakup, it's like, you know, they say flashing lights may cause epileptic seizures in some people. I don't have that condition, but I kind of feel like this is going to give me that condition. The white sparkles just seem really distracting. In fact, I've proposed to HC0 that maybe it would be better if, oh, the idea that, like that's as bad as it gets. I proposed to them that maybe it would be better to do black sparkles, or I don't know what, I'm not an engineer, but these white sparkles are what happens to HC0 when it gets breakup. Next, we're going to do walk snail, and this looks unlike anything I've ever seen. As we come around this corner, you're going to see the bit rate. Right now it's reading 20 megabits per second. It's going to start dropping like crazy, and what the F? It's like the psychedelic just kicked in. It's all smeary. Oh, I guess it's not like unlike anything I've ever seen. Kids, ask your parents. The screen gets all smeary, and it's really difficult to fly through. Like, we'll see DJI in a second, and DJI kind of gets blocky, which reduces detail, but there we go. Okay, pop up, it comes right back. The smeariness of walk snail is it's terrible. It's really difficult to fly through, and yeah, you just don't want to be in that situation, period. It's one of the reasons why I think the usable range of walk snail is less than the usable range of DJI, because the way that DJI breaks up, I think, is a little easier to handle. I don't know. Not everybody agrees with me on that. Let's take a look at DJI. Here is the DJI Vista video transmitter being used with the V2 goggles. And I wanted to show you this segment just so you could see like what it looks like when it's good. It's pretty freaking good. Like, there's a little bit of blockiness on screen if you freeze frame it, but overall it's showing a lot of detail and looks pretty decent. As we come up around this corner, we're going to start to see the bitrate dropping, and we should also see some stutters maybe jumping in as well. I will say there was a big stutter right there. I will say walk snail didn't seem to stutter. Maybe that's an improvement. Oh, big stutter there. And it's starting to get blocky. It's going to get real blocky here. There it goes. That, and in fact, I even fail-safe my quad. Okay, well, let's see what difference the O3 air unit makes. Long story short, it's better. As we come up to this corner, you can see the bitrate again in the lower right, 44, 28, 17, 14 megabits per second. Hanging in there pretty good. I think one thing we see with the O3 air unit is that even when the bitrate gets low, somehow the image stays pretty freaking usable. In fact, the image could get all the way down to 1 or 2 megabits per second, and I can still keep flying. It's really extraordinary, to be honest with you. Let's just, 4 megabits per second, like, I mean, I'm kind of punching out here because I'm like, is it going to hold or am I going to lose it? But it really surprisingly good. Now let's talk about range and penetration of the systems. That's what everybody wants to know about, right? Whenever somebody walks up to you while you're flying, what do they ask you? How far can it go? That's what everybody wants to know. How far can it go? Analog video can have excellent range and penetration depending on the output power of the video transmitter. The thing about analog is that there is a wide variety of analog hardware made by a wide variety of manufacturers. So there are some very inexpensive analog video transmitters, very small, very light, without a lot of output power. There are some analog video transmitters with much more output power. They're bigger, they're heavier, and they consume more power. There's everything across the board. At the highest end, analog video transmitters can have 2.5 watts of output power or more, and that's a lot. That's enough to go really freaking far. The walk snail system has pretty good range and penetration. Its digital technology means that it can make a lot out of a little to give you a usable image even when the signal is getting weak. But the highest output powers of the walk snail video transmitters, 1000 milliwatts and 1200 milliwatts, in my opinion, they're not as stable as the lower ones, 700 milliwatts and below. I run my walk snail video transmitters at 700 milliwatts because what I find is that when I go to 1000 or 1200 milliwatts, the quality of the image actually goes down a little bit. The latency is a little bit less consistent, and there's just more breakup. And I feel like I'd rather have like a rock solid 700 milliwatts than kind of a, feels like we're kind of turned it up to 11 and it doesn't really like it. That's my experience of Walksnail. So I would say that Walksnail has better range and penetration than analog most of the time, unless you have like a really high powered analog video transmitter. And even then, analog is going to be kind of crappy low resolution, whereas Walksnail is going to be higher resolution and digital. The DJI Vista generation video transmitters have unbelievable range and penetration. As long as you're okay with the variable latency and the fact that when the signal gets weak, they get all blocky. Some people call it Minecraft mode. As long as you're okay with that, they have excellent range and penetration. And the DJI O3 Air unit is even better. Somehow, it's even better. It has more stable latency, it has less breakup, and it goes even farther. So, cool, DJI. I don't know how you did that. And HC0 is in kind of a weird place. HC0 has okay range and penetration. It is roughly on par with analog, milliwatt for milliwatt. So a 1 watt analog video transmitter and a 1 watt HC0 video transmitter will have about the same range and penetration. But analog, you can buy a 2.5 watt video transmitter if you want to and go even further, whereas HC0 caps out at 1 watt, and that's it. The other thing is that some people have less tolerance for those HC0 sparkles. And some people would they'd be like, forget this, I'm turning around, I'm coming home. Even though technically maybe you could have kept flying and gone a little farther, whereas with analog, you're going to get static, but they might find that a little more tolerable to fly through. So I would say that under real world conditions, HC0 has about the same range as analog or less, depending on your tolerance for sparkles, and significantly less range and penetration than DJI and Walksnail. Now we come to community integration, which is something that some people watching this are going to care a lot about, and some people are not going to care about at all. And that's going to heavily affect which direction you go on these video systems. So HC0 and Walksnail have a pretty good track record of working with developers, listening to community requests, delivering new features quickly, and integrating well with flight controller firmware like Betaflight, KISS, and iNav. They have a really good track record of community integration. And the people who care about this care about it because, like, the Betaflight developers will come up with some new feature, and the DJI people can't use it because DJI hasn't done the work to make it work. And then all the HC0 and Walksnail people are like, yeah, we have this new feature. And everybody with DJI is like, whatever, we're flying DJI, we don't care. But they really want it, right? HC0 is open sourcing almost all its hardware, code, and other IP. Not 100% of it. There are a couple things that they're sort of keeping proprietary, but like the CAD models for the shell of their goggles, open source. The firmware for their video transmitters and the goggles, open source. And people are already hacking this and adding things to it. If you love open source, HC0 is the only video system. Well, I guess analog is technically open source, but there's not a lot of development going on in analog. This last bullet point shows it's not really developing. It's kind of being there. It's there. And it's sort of slowly stagnating and it's getting the job done. Walksnail has still not delivered on some promised features, such as audience mode. So between Walksnail and HC0, both of them are good, but HC0 is better in terms of community integration. And DJI is the worst in this respect, which is not to say that DJI doesn't listen to the community at all. But it feels like DJI is this gigantic organization, and there are some people within DJI who are truly enthusiasts about FPV, who want to engage with the community, who want to give us the things that we want. And then those people have to go through this gigantic bureaucracy, and sometimes it results in things not getting done in the way that maybe we would like them. It seems that I've seen 2 DJI FPV product releases now, and it seems like around the time of product release, DJI is super responsive, and they're paying attention, and they're listening, and we get a whole bunch of firmware updates and feature improvements and bug fixes, and then that kind of just tapers off. And then a new product comes out a few years later, and more new stuff! And sometimes even the feature requests that we asked for in the old product, they don't come in the old product, they come in the new product, which, if you've got the old product, screw you. Doesn't help you. but that just seems to be the way they work. So DJI seems to kind of run hot and cold in terms of community integration, but there's just no debate that HC0 and Walksnail are light years ahead. What about micro quads? Why are micro quads on the slide by themselves? Because micro quads are a really important part of the FPV community. There's plenty of people out there who primarily or exclusively fly very small quads. Maybe they live somewhere where it's not really feasible for them to fly a big quadcopter outside, or maybe they just love micro quads. And when you're dealing with very small aircraft, the weight and power consumption of the video transmitter matter a lot. DJI video transmitters are relatively large and heavy, and they just are not appropriate for micro-sized builds. They can be okay in builds as small as maybe a 3-inch toothpick build or 3 or 3.5-inch. I've seen 2.5-inch DJI builds that flew okay, but really I think around the 3-inch or 95mm size is roughly where DJI sort of bottoms out. People have done smaller builds, even as small as like 75mm, but they make a lot of compromises in terms of performance and durability, and I just don't think it's ideal. Analog is really the king when it comes to micro builds, because analog video transmitters can be incredibly light and incredibly small. Even sometimes they're integrated directly into the flight controller. So that you just got a flight controller, and somewhere in there on the board with the components is a video transmitter. There's just a little antenna hanging off there, and boom, you don't even need a separate video transmitter with analog sometimes. Walksnail and HD0 both have a small, lightweight video transmitter and camera kit that's tailored to micro-sized quads. They're not quite as small and lightweight as analog, but they have significantly better image quality and range. And as a result, many micropilots like them, even though they don't give you quite as good performance as the lighter, smaller analog video transmitters. Well, we can't talk about this stuff without talking about price. And I've got some typical prices broken out here on the slide, which you can pause the video and you can kind of look at it. I'm not going to read you the whole slide, but analog is 100% the cheapest. It can be a little bit expensive. The goggles, especially, if you buy high-end premium analog goggles, they can be pretty expensive. Bear in mind, those high-end premium analog goggles can also usually be used with a Walksnail or HD0 video receiver, so it's not just analog goggles. But they can be pretty expensive, but they can be pretty cheap. You can get a cheap set of analog goggles for like $100, $150. They're not going to have great resolution. They're not going to have really fancy, bright OLED screens, but they will get you in the air, and there's simply nothing else that can get you flying at as low of a price point as analog. DJI, HD0, and Walksnail are all expensive. In fact, I'm kind of hard-pressed to pick one being more expensive than the other. It's kind of going to depend. If you already have a set of goggles that you can use with a standalone HD0 video receiver or Walksnail video receiver, then you could save yourself $300 to $500 getting into those systems and come out ahead. DJI V2 goggles are only around $450 now, which is a hell of a bargain, frankly. But all of these systems have pretty expensive goggles, pretty expensive air units and cameras, and just you're going to be in the hundreds and hundreds of dollars range. But you're going to get way, way better image quality than analog. It's just a question of if you can afford it. What we're going to do next is I'm going to tell you which system I think is best for you, depending on who you are. And you've probably got an idea already of which system is best, and so we're going to see if you and I agree or if I got it completely wrong. But before we do that, Patreon is a website where you can subscribe to me for as little as $2 a month or more if you feel like I've earned it. The amount you subscribe at is totally up to you, and you can stop whenever you want. Patrons get exclusive access to my Discord server, which is full of friendly, helpful people just like me, ready to chat with you about FPV and help you solve your problems. There's even a buy-sell trade forum and a troubleshooting forum where you can post questions and get answers from people trying to help you out. I would love for today to be the day that you decide that I have earned it, and you're going to go sign up on Patreon to support me. Making videos like this is a ton of work. I love doing it. I hope that they help you make better buying decisions, educate you, entertain you maybe, and I hope that if today is that day, you'll head on down there, click the link, and sign up. And today's not the day. I'm not going to harp on it any longer. I'm going to get on with the video, because I got to get to work earning it. Now it's time for me to tell you which system I think is best for you. And I hope you'll go down in the comments and tell me whether I got it right or whether you completely disagree with my conclusion and you're going up with something else. If you're on the tightest of tight budgets, then analog is the one for you. And I bet there's no room for disagreement here. Analog is so much cheaper than everything else. You're not going to get the high resolution of the digital systems, but you can get really good range and penetration, and you will get low and consistent latency. So Mr. Steele flew analog, still flies analog for freestyle for a long time. It's good enough for him. It's surely good enough for you, right? So don't feel too bad about it. If you've got plenty of money and you want to cruise around, have fun, and have a relatively hassle-free experience, DJI is the one to get. The V2 goggles and the Vista video transmitter are a little bit cheaper and have a little bit worse resolution. The goggles 2, when used with the O3 video transmitter, are a little more expensive, but have that. They're the only system with 1080p resolution, and it just looks so good. The hardware is so mature. It's so durable. It's just such a great all-around package that I think for the kind of person with a lot of money falling out their wallet and who's just like, just which one should I get? I think DJI is probably the one that's going to make the most people happy. Unless you are one of the other categories that I list that shouldn't go with DJI, like racers. Racers should not use DJI or Walksnail because they are not compatible with the timing systems used at races, and the variable latency makes precise, fast flying harder. Yes, there are people who race with DJI and Walksnail. I'm not saying it can't be done. I'm just saying if you are serious about racing, then analog and HD0 are going to be the systems that are going to work the best for you. Between those two, HD0 hardware is not as durable as analog and is significantly more expensive. But the HD0 90 FPS camera is a total game changer for high-speed racing. I'm not exaggerating. It's really a game changer, unless you crash and break it. Well, analog stuff breaks too, but I think that HD0 stuff is just a little bit less durable, and racers do crash a lot. For freestyle pilots, this is the one where everybody's going to disagree with me, and I don't have a solid pick. Analog and HD0 have low consistent latency, which allows fast response when flying in proximity, and fast response is important, especially when flying freestyle, where you're not flying a consistent path like a racer is, so you may dive into a gap and then suddenly there's something in front of you and you're going to dodge it, and you need that fast response. But lots of great freestyle pilots fly DJI and Walksnail, and they say that the improved resolution of the DJI and Walksnail systems means they can see more details and line up tricks and avoid obstacles better. And I don't think there's a definitive answer there. I think that there are more people flying freestyle on DJI and Walksnail, but mostly DJI, than on analog and HD0. But I'm not sure how many of those people are so in love with the nice image quality of DJI and Walksnail that they are overlooking the fact that they're actually worse pilots than they would be if they were flying analog or HD0. When I fly HD0 in analog, but mostly HD0 at 90 frames per second, I'm amazed at how much more control I have over the quad. But then I fly into a tree branch that I didn't see, and I'm like, F this! And I can't tell you which one of those things is going to be the most significant to you. If you do go with DJI, be aware that the O3 camera has significantly worse low light performance and dynamic range than the Vista generation. So if you fly in dark places, then stick to the Vista generation, not the O3. The O3 looks really nice. It has high resolution and great colors, but the shadow detail really sucks, and the low light sensitivity really sucks. If you are a professional on a movie set, then why are you watching this video? You already know what you need, and it's DJI. The DJI system is incredibly mature. The hardware is incredibly reliable, more reliable than any other piece of FPV gear, probably, in terms of just how well made it is and how much it stands up to abuse. Literally every professional pilot that I know flies DJI on set. Like, I literally cannot think of a single professional pilot flying for movies, flying for commercials, I literally can't think of one who flies analog. Actually, I just thought of one, but he's just starting out. And the exception to that would be microquads. If for some reason you're flying a very, very small microquad on a movie set, then it's not going to be a DJI you just can't carry a DJI video transmitter on a very small quad. But it's just going to be DJI for pros. That's it. The other stuff isn't even really in contention. If you want DJI-like performance, but you hate DJI politically, economically, as a company, there's people out there who have very strong feelings about DJI, strong negative feelings about DJI, and they just don't want a damn thing to do with DJI as a company, no matter how good their technology might be. You should get Walksnail. It's like DJI. It's not. Mom, can we get DJI? We have DJI at home. That's Walksnail. It's not quite as good as DJI in many ways, but it's pretty close. And it's not DJI. If you want the absolute best image quality, the DJI Goggles 2 with O3 are it, hands down. If you want a high quality onboard recording so you don't have to carry a GoPro, the DJI Goggles 2 or the V2 goggles with the O3 Air unit are the one to get. The O3 Air unit can do 4K onboard recording. It can do up to 4K 100 frames per second on. Actually, I think it can do 4K 120 now. It is as good an action camera. It's almost as good an action camera as a GoPro. I still don't think it's quite as good as a GoPro, but you can save yourself a $500 GoPro and 180 grams of weight by going with the O3 instead. And that makes the O3 very, very compelling for a lot of people. For micro quads, it's going to be analog, Walksnail, or HC0. Analog is the lightest, but there's a tiny, weak video transmitter that has terrible range and bad image quality for the cameras. HC0 is the next lightest with good image quality and range, and Walksnail is a little bit heavier with great image quality and range. And it's just, where do you want to be on the image quality and range versus lightweight and performance spectrum? I don't think there's a single right answer there. There's one more thing we got to talk about, and that is long distance flying. And I know that there aren't a lot of long distance flyers out there, but I don't want to act like you guys don't exist. Analog is the king for long distance flying. You can buy high powered video transmitters and even use signal amplifiers if desired, or you can use a great big high gain antenna on the receiver. And with analog, you only need one antenna on the receiver, whereas with the digital systems, you typically will have 4 antennas, which just means, instead of having one gigantic parabolic dish, you would have 4, and no one's going to do that, right? So analog is the king for long distance flying. In addition, the way that analog breaks up, sort of the analog way that the signal goes away and comes back, means that you can dial it in the antenna, I got it aimed just right, and get that signal back. Whereas with digital, it just kind of goes, I'm gone. And then you're like, what do I do? I don't know, maybe I'm just gone. So a lot of long distance pilots like analog. DJI is the worst for long distance flying. Well, I thought DJI had excellent range and penetration. It does, but there is a hard cap where the DJI system, after a certain distance, just stops working. No matter how many high gain antennas you put on, it just stops working. For the Vista generation, it's 13.3 kilometers. I think for the O3, it is longer than 13.3 kilometers. I think it's in the 25 kilometer range. I don't know the exact number, but basically if you hit that number, you cannot go any further, and that's that. If you're not planning to exceed that range, DJI is real good for, well, is 13 kilometers long distance? You can argue about that in the comments. If you're going to stay underneath about 13 kilometers, then DJI is great. Great range, great penetration, great signal, but for true long range, DJI is just not a contender. And then HC0 and Walksnail are good for long distance. They have no fixed range limit, and you can put high gain antennas on to increase the range, but you're gonna want at least 2 and maybe 4 antennas, so it's gonna be more expensive. And they max out their output power at 1 watt for HC0 or 1.2 watts for Walksnail, whereas analog can go to 2.5 watts or even higher. So you could easily get 20 or 30 kilometers on HC0 and Walksnail with the right antennas, and maybe even further. Now there's 2 possibilities at this point in the video. Either you are ready to buy something, you've made your decision and you're ready to go, or you'd like to do a little more research. If you are ready to buy, I was going to say I'm going to put links down in the video description, but that would be a shitload of links. So instead, I'm going to put a link to my website, fpdknowitall.com. That's where I've got a whole list of products with information about the products and links to the products that you can use to pick them up. Those links are affiliate links. So it really helps me out when you click those links before you make your purchase. It tells the store that I sent you, and I get a little bit of a commission when you click those links. So definitely, I would sure appreciate it if you go to that website and use those links to make your purchases. On the other hand, if you're interested in doing more research, well, you can also go to that website. I've got a lot of information there about specific pieces of hardware that you might want to pick up. If you've settled on DJI, then which goggles are you going to get? Which video transmitter are you going to get? Etc., etc. In addition, I'm going to put a whole bunch of reference links down in the video description below, just all the videos I can think of that you might be interested in seeing next. And yeah, okay, just for the algorithm, I'm going to put a couple cards on screen of 2 videos that I will handpick as stuff that you might want to see next as well. I don't know what they're going to be yet, though. Thank you so much for watching this video. Hope it was educational. I'll see you in the next one. It's possible. So they just say, oh, just don't read the comments. Well, I don't do that. But it does mean that when I read the comments, I don't want to subject myself to someone who just wants to berate me. So that's who I definitely just banned permanently. Who do I ban permanently? Should we look? Ooh, that's risky. Some people don't know they've been banned because you can still leave comments. It's just no one sees your comments. Should we look? Okay. Let's see. So a lot of these people are going to be just people who spam the channel or advertise. That's the other thing. A lot of these people are people who are just bots or advertisers. These do not appear to be in any particular order. I banned Jesus Christ. Wow. A lot of these text me on Telegram things get banned. Don't ask me why these people got banned. I literally cannot tell you. Except in general, like if you're just spamming, then you get banned. And if you just really, like I said. I banned Donald Trump. Oh, this is going to be controversial. I'm not going to go into it. I'm not going to go into it. Let's see. Why is Morton Upshot banned? I recognize that name. I must have had it. Don't ban people. It takes a fair amount to get me to ban you. So I probably, just because I can't remember why I banned you, doesn't mean I'm gonna go back on my decision. I'm pretty sure if you ended up here, then I definitely think you didn't belong here. Let's see. But I usually, after I ban you, I never think of you again, so. So I'm not going to remember why I banned you. Let's see. Looks like we have less than 1,000 people banned. Yeah. I'm looking for names. Anyway, these are all the people. You can see if your name is on this list. There you go. That's it. That's all of them. Mr. Steele isn't banned. Shut up. There might have been a fake Mr. Steel troll account. Why is Mupshot banned? I don't know. Mupshot, you're here. You're in my Discord. Why are you banned? I thought that's weird too. What did you do, man? I'll unban you, Mupshot. You're clearly not too much trouble. Or because you're here in my Discord. Is that really your account, Morton? He's literally in the Discord right now. Oh my god. How did that happen? What did you do, Mupshot? Did you piss me off? Okay, Morton Upshot. Is that you? Is that your account, Morton? What did you do, Morton? Alright, I'm unbanning you right now, Morton. I don't know what you did, but you pissed me off one day. But you're here in my Discord, and you're obviously not making too much trouble, or you wouldn't be in the Discord. The mods would have told me. All right, I've unbanned you. You see, I did notice you. I was like, why is Morton in this ban list? I don't know. I can't remember. I feel good about that. Okay, let's continue. You're back, Morton. Brown Solo, thank you for a $5 super chat. Does the V-Fly short saver not like 6S input? Mine trips anytime I use it with 6S, but it works on 4S. No, it works fine on 6S. The reason it's tripping is because, hey, Morton, you're back. What did you do, Morton? Why did I ban you? One of us was having a bad day. I don't know. The reason that the short saver is tripping is because you're pulling too much current. If it's pulling more current on 6S for some reason, that's going to make it trip. But it's not that it doesn't like 6S. Hey, Phantom FTV, good to see you. Sunshine, thank you for a $5 super chat. Good cam out of service. Got paid drone gig, not high end, but needs to look decent. Which to use? First gen air unit, DJI camera, Hero 3 Black. Yikes. Oh boy. I can't speak to the Hero 3 Black. I don't know how good a Hero 3 is. That's going back a ways. I would feel embarrassed to deliver to a client footage from a DJI cam. The DJI camera, probably with good color grade, could be made to work. Especially, you have to be using the onboard air unit recording. But Jesus, Sunshine, you've got a paid gig. Just go buy a camera, dude. Go buy a camera. Right? If you can't afford it, return the camera after the gig or something. Like, if you've got a paid gig, you really can't. I mean, I guess it depends on where you're at your career, but like, you need to deliver a quality product to the customer. That's the thing. As a professional, you have to take pride in your work, and you have to deliver a quality product to the customer. If you cannot deliver a quality product to the customer, you should not take their money. So now you're in a situation where you've accepted the customer's money, and you've made a commitment to be there and shoot the gig for the customer, and you don't have the equipment to deliver on that. The answer to that cannot be to deliver a substandard product to the customer. That's not acceptable. Now, if you look at the footage from the DJI Air unit or the GoPro 3 and you say, I can make this work, and you sincerely feel that that represents the quality and the standard of work that you're comfortable with, and that the customer will be happy with it, then you can make that decision. But the fact that you're asking me on the live stream suggests that you feel, and I agree, that that is not sufficient. And you're compromising, and you shouldn't do that. Don't do that to yourself. Don't do that to your company. Don't do that to your customer. If you need a GoPro to shoot this and your GoPro is broken, get a GoPro. It's time to pull out your credit card. It's time to put a GoPro on a credit card. And if you can't afford the GoPro, then return it. Return it after the weekend. Or say to yourself, I need to be charging more for these jobs because I need to have 2 GoPros. Because frankly, if you're accepting money to shoot gigs and you only have 1 camera, and if you lose that camera, you can't do the gig, you should not be accepting money to do gigs. I say that with, in a loving and supporting way. That's why a professional will have 3 cameras and 3 quads and feel nervous if they don't have a 4th on, in the wings. You have to be able to deliver for your customer. So borrow a GoPro, rent a GoPro. God forbid you show up and that GoPro breaks or your quad breaks. So it really comes down to what your customer is expecting. I can imagine jobs where a DJI Air unit onboard recording could be good enough. It records 1080p. The dynamic range is good. The colors are okay. And with a good color grade, you could probably get acceptable results. Not like Michael Bay acceptable results, but, just shooting somebody's something or other, maybe. But in general, you shouldn't make your customer accept substandard work because you had a logistical problem. That's your problem, not your customer's problem, and you need to solve it. If you can. So you could borrow a GoPro. I don't know. That's my take on that. Alistair Clark, thank you for a $6 super chat. Just getting into FPV and just finished your beta flight playlist, so sending you a few bucks. Oh, thank you, Alistair. Thank you for €6. Appreciate it. Black Moses, I think that the O3 doesn't perform quite as well with the V2 goggles in terms of range and penetration as it does with the goggles too. I don't have enough hard evidence to really back that up, and I don't know why. But it feels to me, with the O3 Air unit, you can get down to like 1 or 2 megabits per second, and the video is kind of crappy and blocky, but fairly usable. It doesn't get stuttery. Whereas with the V2 goggles, it feels like down around 3 to 5 megabits per second, it is both blocky and stuttery and becomes very, very difficult to fly. So I do think that the O3 is worse with the V2 goggles, but I don't know why. And I people are suggesting, well, maybe it's H.264 versus H.265. I don't know the answer. Do we know for a fact that it uses H.264 and not H.265 with the V2 goggles? I mean, do we? Anyway. Could look at the DVR data. Yeah, that makes sense. That's true. That makes sense. I mean, Sunshine, when's the gig, Sunshine? Sunshine, when's the gig? And where are you in the world? I mean, we'll get you sorted out, Sunshine, unless it's like tomorrow. Next week. Okay, so you have a whole week to solve this problem. We get you sorted out, man. I mean, somebody can lend you a GoPro. What do you need? What do you need to do the gig? Like, what was your ACAM? Somebody on the Discord has a camera they'll lend you. I might have one I could send you. You know, we'll get you sorted out. Limit Break, thanks for 10 Canadian dollars. Thanks for everything. Before I found you on here, I wouldn't have even tried to tinker with any of this stuff. I'm midway through my first build and I haven't blown anything up. I haven't blown anything up yet. And I've replaced it with repaired a few fireflies. Midway through my first build and haven't blown anything up. I watched a video recently. I've been watching these videos. I found this guy, he is Norway's best rock climber. His name is Magnus. I don't even know his last name. And he does rock climbing content. And I watched a video where he free soloed a pitch with Alex Honnold, who's famous for free soloing El Cap, among other things. And it was Magnus's first sort of big free solo. And about 2/3 of the way up, they're resting on a ledge. And Magnus says, you know, I don't want to jinx it, but I'm really glad I did this. This has been really great. And Alex says, let's just finish the pit. Let's just finish the climb. And the way I read that was like, don't get complacent. You could still die if you fall. Don't start thinking, oh, it's over, it's all good. Stay focused. And I think of that. It's not the same as you're halfway through your build and you haven't blown anything up yet, but I think of that. The number one place to blow things up is at the end of the build, when you finally power it up. Anyway. We are 2 minutes from the end of the stream. Is Aaron Ciati streaming today? I would guess that he is, and I would hope that he would be. There he is! Aaron Ciati. Yeah. Free soloing is bonkers. It's bonkers because it feels, I mean, obviously I don't rock climb, but it feels like it is, depending on the route you pick, if it's an easy enough route and you're a highly skilled climber like Magnus, like I don't think that Alex would have had Magnus do a climb where there was actually a risk that Magnus couldn't physically do it. So I think Alex picked a route that he knew Magnus was 110% physically capable of doing. And then the only thing you could screw up is mentally. You could lose focus, you could make a mistake, you could, and so it's weird to have something like free soloing that is, for these guys who are at this incredibly high level of skill and physical fitness, it is this almost purely mental challenge. The only way you're going to die is if you lose focus, if you get stupid and make a mistake. But if you maintain focus and don't make a mistake, you will accomplish this feat, and you'll be fine. And it's this weird thing where it's weird. There aren't a lot of things in life that are like that. Like, it's always better if you maintain focus, but sometimes just shit happens, or you're just not good enough that day. Anyway, interesting stuff. That is it, folks. It's 2 p.m. That's the end of the stream. Thank you so much for all your messages. Thank you for being here. Ciati, get on it. Adit, you seem to really appreciate when I notice you on stream, and so I will. You keep saying that we're friends, and I'm not sure if you mean the same thing by that I hope that you mean. But there you are, Adit. I see you. Okay. Bumper FPV, I see you too. I see you too, buddy. Alrighty, folks. That's going to do it. We are out of here. Ciati, have a great stream. I'll see you tomorrow at 8 p.m. Good night, everybody. Goodbye, everybody. Equipment's faces. Some of them do. Let's put it on there. Let's make sure it's flat. Power on. Okay, so this is the analog. Let's just double check that. HD0. I'm wrong. See? See, that's why it's good to check. We should start with the analog. Where's the analog? Analog. Okay, so here's the analog. Hello, can you zero? Why? That's not okay. Okay. The analog, 34.1 grams. Okay? 34 grams for analog. HD0, 38 grams, 38.9, 39 grams. So that's 5 grams heavier. This is going to be Caddx Vista, Naked Vista, 44 grams. And Walksnail, 42 grams. 42 grams. So let's do that a different way. Analog. We're going to zero the analog. Can you decide? I just bought this scale, and I'm not loving the fact that it is, oh, are we happy now? Okay. So, analog. We're going to have analog be the 0 point. HD0 is 5 grams heavier than analog. Walksnail is 8 grams heavier than analog. The DJI is 11 grams heavier than analog. Very interesting stuff. I don't have anything under the scale, I assure you. I don't. Oh, is it this fucking, sorry. This zip tie is messing it up, maybe? That might be it. Okay. Well, obviously, we have to fly it to really know what's what, but it's going to be a very, very interesting video. I'm looking forward to making it for you. Let me ask you this. What do we need to see in this video that I might not think of? Curious if you guys want to leave a comment or leave a super chat. Let me know what you want to see in the video. Very cool stuff. What's the analog VTX? Does it do 1.2 watts? No. So I'm torn about how to test the video range because the video range, like the analog VTX is not going to be as high output power. The HD01 is surely the 200 milliwatt output power. So this is only a comparison of the video range as pertains to microquads. Excuse me. And I know for a fact that if I released a video saying I compared HD0, Walksnail, DJI, and analog, some people are going to be, let's just be straight. The HD0 people are going to be like, why didn't you use the HD0 can do 1 watt? I know, but not in this form factor. But the idea I think is that this is going to highlight something that all the other reviews I shouldn't say all, but many other reviews, including mine, overlook. And that is you test the range and the image quality, okay? But you don't test the difference that the weight makes on the performance. And for micros, that matters. So, it's going to be very, very interesting comparison. So, let's not forget that poll. We're 1 hour into the stream. Let's check the poll about daylight saving time from the beginning of the stream. Okay. Oh, test them all at 25 milliwatts. That's interesting. I guess for racing? What do you guys think of that? Should we test them at 25 milliwatts? Is anybody... The only reason you would lock yourself at 25 milliwatts is if you're racing. Is anybody racing this? What should be done with daylight saving time? Going back to the poll. 61% of people say switch to summertime all the time. 27% of people say keep it how it is now. And only 11% of people say switch to wintertime all the time. There we go. Everyone agrees that wintertime is garbage. But some people feel like sometimes going to wintertime is better. That's how I read that. to know. Good to know. Let's see. Willie asks, on Banggood, there's a sale for the EV300O for $279. Really? You gotta be real careful with Banggood. Is it? Are you? Where are you seeing that, Willie? To the USA warehouse? Oh, there we go. God dang. What did I think of the EV300O? I can't remember. This is why I started a YouTube channel. I can't remember anything that happens in the world. No, I liked it. The EV300O is the Eachine version of the SkyZone Skyo 4X, which is a very good goggle. If I'm remembering that right, that's a really dang good. Yeah, it's the same. Let's see. Can I see this? What are you doing, Barclaw? Skyo 4X. Yeah, it's just got a little bit smaller screens, I think. That's. Well, I think that's really good. Are they shipping it with the fixed ReadyMix module? No, the EV300O was not the one with the latency issue, Gizmo. I think that was the 300D. That seems like a hell of a deal. If that's a Skyo, I believe that's a Skyo 4X with a smaller screen. That's a pretty good deal, especially if it comes with the fixed Rapid Mix module. But the fixed Rapid Mix module is only $30 plus shipping, which is still a pretty good deal. Or you could try to shoehorn a Rapid Fire or a Fusion into there if you like. Yeah, this is that's a pretty good deal. I think it was the original 300D that had the issue. The 300O doesn't come with steady view. Okay, so personally, I would just junk this module and get a better module. And I know there are some issues with fitting Rapid Fire and or Fusion into these, but this is a pretty good price for a pretty good set of goggles, I would say. I don't agree with that. Who said it? FPV Gizmo said, just test all the quads at 25 milliwatts, or whatever power setting they can all do, then power is not a factor. FPV Gizmo, here's why I don't like to do that. Number one, let's say that I set all of them to 200 milliwatts. They can all do 200 milliwatts. And then we do a test of the video system. That 200 milliwatts is not very precisely calibrated. Well, for DJI and Walksnail, maybe it is. We have no real way of verifying with the digital video transmitters that 200 milliwatts is calibrated, because their bidirectional communication is very difficult to measure. The analog one, it might be 350 milliwatts, it might be 150 milliwatts. It's a complete crapshoot in many ways. So setting them all with max power, let's say I'm going to do a 0 to 60 acceleration test on a car. Well, I put my foot down, I floor it, and then, if we assume that the car has traction control and stuff, then the human element is mostly removed. I just put the pedal down and the car accelerates as fast as it can. With a video transmitter, when you set it to max power, it's doing the max that it can. And then when you do a range test, you've sort of removed that variable. And I think that's a more meaningful test than setting it to an arbitrary power and assuming that power is going to be the same between the different video transmitters. The other thing is that, the exception to that is if you're racing and you need to be set to 25 milliwatts. Okay, that's a realistic test. We're going to set it to 25 milliwatts and we're going to see what kind of performance we get, because that's what you're going to do in the real world. But in the real world, I don't know when you would ever set a video transmitter to 200 milliwatts and care about It's not, you're trying to have an apples to apples fair comparison, but you're not actually getting it. So I wouldn't do that. It is going to be interesting because here's the thing. The Vista is going to give you 1200 milliwatts. The Vista quad is going to fly the worst, spoiler, and it's going to crush every single other one in terms of range and penetration. So it's going to be a very interesting video. Thank you, King Poopra, for a $20 super chat. Very generous super chat, too. King Poopra says, I got a Hexplorer, a Flywheel Hexplorer after your review. It's awesome. Glad you like it. Glad my review helped you out. Bannister Post says the Vista will put out 1200 milliwatts if you don't burn it out. Bannister, naked Vistas they don't burn out because they're naked. If they overheat, they shut down and they don't damage themselves. The main reason, in my opinion, the main reason naked Vistas burn out is because the mounting lets the boards touch and take damage. As long as they're securely mounted, a naked Vista, it will overheat faster, but simply overheating will not cause it to damage itself because as long as it'll just shut down and it won't burn out. That's my opinion. Aber the Ham, thank you for a $10 super chat. I did get your email. I haven't responded to it. Emails, Aber, emails where people ask me, can you help me solve this problem? And then I just answer the question. Those are easy for me to respond to. Emails where someone says, hey, do you want to do this thing that will then create an expectation or obligation on your part? Those are harder for me to answer because I have to think about my schedule and stuff. So that's why I haven't answered you yet. Rodney Edwards, thank you for £5. I'm about to invest in analog-specific goggles. Which goggles do you recommend, or is there anything on the immediate horizon worth waiting for? Yes, Rodney Edwards. The HD Zero goggle is 100. No, here's what I would say. If a $600-ish analog goggle might, or frankly, digital goggle, might be in your budget in the next month, then don't buy a goggle in the next month or two, because the HD Zero goggle could be a game changer. Now, it's supposed to come out. It's going to be a few months before it comes out, and maybe you don't want to wait that long. When is it? When is the HD Zero goggle supposed to actually be for sale? I think it's next year, early next year, but I'm not sure. Not sure about that. The HD Zero goggle will have HD Zero built in. It will have the ability to do analog through a module adapter, and its analog deinterlacing is the best of any analog goggle ever made, because they actually do proper deinterlacing and not just BS sort of frame shifting. And it will have the ability to work with the Walksnail module, so in theory, it's like the one goggle to rule them all. If you care only about analog, you still might be motivated to buy the HD Zero goggle because it's got great screens and superior deinterlacing.